Welcome again to Richard Bey Talk. I'm here with my producer, Albert Reinoso, up in Port St. Lucie.
Hola.
Yes. Oh, hola. Now you're recognizing your Spanish heritage. No?
Okay. For the moment, I will. Yes. Okay.
And okay. Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
Okay. You know, sometimes as you get older, maybe some of you who are older remember this. You know, sometimes you can't remember where you put your keys, you can't remember where you put your phone, but you remember things from when you were like a little kid, commercials and cartoons that you used to watch, the Saturday morning shows like Andy's Gang that you. Well, I always have remembered there was a cartoon about a prize fight. It may have been Bugs Bunny and the prize fight. I don't know. But the announcer, the radio announcer for the prize fight keeps going. He's up. He's down. He's up. He's down. He's up. He's up. He's down. He's down. Well, you could say the same thing about Joe Biden and the Democrats this week. For so many weeks, we've heard, oh, the Democrats are in disarray. And now people are saying the Democrats are in array. So many things all of a sudden, in the narrative, at least, turned positive for the Democrats and for Joe Biden very recently. Of course, Joe Biden doesn't get credit for, some of it. Over 500,000 jobs. Now they revised it. It's 550,000 new jobs, last month. Gas prices have been coming down every day for the last 2 months. Thanks, Joe Biden. I mean, of course, people were blaming him. They were putting stickers on the gas pumps when the price went up. But I don't think people are putting stickers on when the price comes down. We killed the head of Al-Qaeda. I kept thinking, where, all these years, it's been over 20 years. This Ayman al-Zawahiri, he was a doctor. He had been in prison and radicalized in Egypt, but he was the brains behind the outfit. Osama bin Laden was the money behind it. But we killed him on a balcony in Kabul, Afghanistan. Hey, thanks, Joe Biden. And then, of course, there was what happened in Kansas, where I think there was a national shock that in Kansas, Republican Kansas, Bob Dole's Kansas, Chris Kobach's Kansas, that they voted to leave an amendment in the state constitution that prohibits banning abortion. Now, they do have restrictions in Kansas about abortion, but they didn't want to eradicate abortion completely. And overwhelmingly, it was 59% of the voters voted not to remove that clause from the state constitution that would have allowed the Republican legislature to ban abortion. So everybody said, well, hey, that's taking the national temperature. Abortion may be an issue that really helps the Democrats at the polls coming up. And then, of course, there are all the other bills. The CHIPS bill to support and invigorate chip manufacturing within the United States. Without having our dependency on chips, microchips, which are in everything from your refrigerator to your phone to your car. I mean, the world would stop all of a sudden if we didn't have, or the modern world would stop if we didn't have microchips. And that was a bipartisan bill that passed. And then this new bill, which they're calling the Inflation Act. Now, to be fair, most analysts believe it won't add to inflation, but if there is any effect in bringing down inflation, it will be minimal. But it's the largest climate bill that we've had in a generation. Largest climate bill ever. We got the veterans health measure passed that will help those veterans who are suffering health complications from those toxic pits. and that was bipartisan. And I mean, it's been a pretty damn good week. And before that, what did we have? We had other bills that were passed. So, you know, all of a sudden now, the media narrative is, oh, the Democrats are on the upswing and Joe Biden is on the upswing. He's down. Now he's up and he'll be down again. Of course, we add 550,000 new jobs to the economy, and Fox News reports this, that the Biden administration missed their forecast because they thought the jobs number would be lower. Oh my God, look at this. It's a criticism because they created more jobs than they thought they would create. So Fox News viewers are going, I mean, during the day, I have the TV set on all the time, which may not be helpful to your mental health, but I do switch around and I listen to Fox News, and it's a whole different world on Fox News. It's all immigration, it's all negativity, it's all, and then of course MSNBC. Listen, even when Biden was down, MSNBC was down on Biden. I thought they were, they were too harsh on Biden, and that's the difference. But we had a president before who was so popular that he served 4 terms. He was elected. Well, he didn't serve 4 terms because he died in the 4th, but he was elected 4 times to the presidency. And when Joe Biden became president, a lot of the pundits were saying, this man is his model. And of course, that president was FDR, who changed the country completely eventually over the, 4, 8, 12, 16 years he was president. But he had rough going in the beginning because he had a conservative Supreme Court, just as Joe Biden does, who struck down a lot of his New Deal programs as being unconstitutional. But when he was running for his second term, he made a speech. Now, in this speech, it's probably most famous for the line where he said, they hate me for what I stand for and what I do, and I welcome their hatred. Okay, but I've excised that because there's a lot of, everybody knows that, but there's a lot of other things in this speech. Joe Biden, if he wants to be FDR, he could just dust off this old FDR speech and deliver it again. Take a listen.
For nearly 4 years now, you have had an administration which, instead of twirling its thumbs, has rolled up its sleeves. And I can assure you that we will keep our sleeves rolled up. I should like to have it said of my first administration that in it the forces of selfishness and of lust for power met their match. I should like to have it said, wait a minute, I should like to have it said of my second administration that in it these forces met their master.
What a speech. Of course, we had Churchill at the same time making great speeches, but not at that time, much later. But FDR, great speech maker. So many of the things, the 4 freedoms, we have nothing to fear but fear itself, a day that will live in infamy. But that was a speech just right after his first term. We have rolled up our sleeves. Well, Joe Biden could do worse than just taking that speech down verbatim and making it. Of course, he probably would not have the same vigorous delivery. All right, but, half the money in this new bill that they just passed, they call the Inflation Reduction Act, half of it is going to alleviate federal deficits, about $300 billion. There's a 15% minimum tax on big. How could people be against that? A corporation that makes over $1 billion and pays no taxes currently shouldn't have to pay at least 15%? Is that so difficult to sell to the American public? How about putting a cap on the price of insulin? 7 million Americans take insulin daily. I once had a roommate the first time. I don't have diabetes, but I had a roommate who's a pretty famous TV star now who had diabetes. And we lived together, and he had his needles in the fridge. And I was like, oh, my God, you have to put that in your arm every day? And he said, yes. The cost of insulin for patients, this is patients with insurance, it ranges from about $300 a month to $1,000 a month. Now, in this bill, if you're on Medicare, you're capped at $35 a month. But the Democrats wanted to cap insulin at $35 a month for everybody with insurance. Everybody who has, your employer-based insurance, you'd only have to spend $35 a month for insulin. Now, if you don't get that insulin and you have diabetes, you're going to die. That's so difficult. That idea is so difficult to sell to the American public. Is it so difficult to sell the idea that those that oppose these kinds of things don't really care about Americans? Now, this insulin cap, Reverend Warnock, who is the senator from Georgia, that was one of the things that he sponsored. It was very dear to him. And his opponent is Herschel Walker, who has a diagnosed mental illness, dissociative personality disorder. So he's on Fox News, and I missed some of it. But really, Brian Kilmeade had him sitting down. There was hardly an interview. But what they did afterwards, the major part of this segment on Herschel Walker was the two of them jogging and talking about Herschel Walker's exercise routine. And then the two of them got down and did push-ups. Oh, because it's so important to have a senator who can do push-ups. Instead of debates, we should have a push-up competition. I don't think neither Trump nor Biden would do very well in that. All right. Then the other thing is that this bill also returns the IRS to a place where it used to be, where it was well staffed well enough that they could actually do audits. And the Republicans are hammering on this. Oh, they're going to come after you for your audits, and you're going to like that. Well, if you don't cheat on your taxes, you have nothing to fear, unless you're James Comey or McCabe, who were Trump enemies, who both got audited after Trump fired them. And the odds of that are astronomical. Now, I've only been audited once in my life. And when I got the letter, I was shitting a brick. I went, oh, my God. And it happened right after I was on WABC radio talking about against the Iraq war and the WMD evidence. And I'm not saying that there's any connection, but it happened that same year that I got fired. And I'm going, oh, what am I going to do? And I went through my diary and I went through my bills. And I said, oh, I'm going to be audited. What's going to happen? I'm sitting there in the outside waiting room, waiting for the auditor to come out. And this kid comes out. He's 26 years old. And he goes, "Hey, I saw the name and I thought, nah, it couldn't be him." He said, "Oh, I'm your biggest fan. I love your show." And I went, "Thank you, God." And I went inside, and this kid was my auditor. Now, as I walked in, there was an Orthodox Jewish auditor in another cubicle. And as I passed him, he said, "Oi, it's that liberal from ABC Radio." And good thing I didn't get him. But it was fortunate that he was there in the cubicle, because I'd taken things as deductions, and I had to say, I took movies. Every time I went to the movies, I took it as a deduction. And I said, "Because on my show, I have Dick and Dad go to the movies. Isn't that right, sir?" "Yes, he has his father doing the movie reviews." And then I said, "I have singing lessons. And how many I do these parody songs on the radio constantly." "Yes, he has these silly songs on the radio." So in the end, I got through the audit. Everything was justified, and nothing happened. Everything was fine. So, but the IRS, hopefully, usually they used to only go after the big fish, because that's where the money is. The people who are hiring, shifty accountants to get out of paying taxes. And the IRS has been decimated over the last few years and really can't do its job. The number of audits has decreased dramatically. And if there are no audits, nobody would pay tax if we had no audits at all. Now, inflation, is a national problem. But here in Florida, and people blame Joe Biden for inflation, although, if anything, his contribution to it with the money that was given out at the end of the pandemic, it isn't ended, but we thought it was ended, is just minimal. So many of the other things that are inflationary are beyond his control. But there are things here in Florida that Governor DeSantis could do something about. Do you know rents in Palm Beach County, where I live, are up 40%? Now, my lease is up, and I had choices between different kinds of leases for different kinds of months. Some of them were 20% higher. I picked the longest lease possible, and my rent has gone up $250 a month. And my car insurance has gone up, from, what was it, $1,700 a year to $2,100 a year. And that's happened only in the last year and a half. So I went to look it up. It said Florida has some of the highest car insurance in the country. And one of the reasons for that is 24% of the drivers on the road have no insurance at all. Now, can't we do something about that? And when rents go up 40% in a year, as they are across Palm Beach County, the newspaper's filled with articles of people who just can't take it. Couldn't we have a 10% cap on rents? It's not like the costs went higher than 10%, except possibly in home insurance, because that's another thing that all our insurance companies, or almost all of them in Florida, are being downgraded. And it's going to be harder for somebody to get a mortgage, because the insurance companies that are going to be acceptable to the banks are being downgraded left and right here. And yet nobody sits around and blames Ron DeSantis for this, except me. All right. Now, the Conservative Political Action Committee, they had a big convention in Texas. And some of the people, Steve Bannon was there, Trump was there, and, all the screaming and delusional accusations. But Rick Scott, who is the senator from Florida, he's also the head of the Republican senatorial reelection campaign. He was there. This is the speech he made there.
Radio interview.
No, that's not it. No, that's a different clip. This is the speech he made at CPAC. Now, he's a weird looking guy. And the thing that's weird is I could have played the clip of him saying this, but he's not animated when he says it. His eyes are like popped open. He looks like a surprised baby with the bald head and the big round eyes. And in my estimation, he's one of the three most stupid men in Congress. He's lucky Tommy Tuberville and Ron Johnson are there, or because he'd get the trophy. The militant left wing in our country has become the enemy within. The militant left wing? Are Democrats running commercials where a guy chases through a house with an AR-15 to go hunting for his opponents, as the Republicans did? The militant left wing, the Democratic he called them the Democratic militant left wing. January 6th is the Democratic militant left wing. The modern Democratic left is the modern day version of book burners. The most narrow-minded, intolerant people our country has ever seen. The Democratic left is the modern day version of book burners when Ron DeSantis is banning books in school libraries. The most narrow-minded, intolerant people our country has ever seen. Obviously this guy doesn't know that much about history. The Ku Klux Klan had a gigantic march with tens of thousands of people down Pennsylvania Avenue. The German-American Bund, American Nazis, held a rally in Madison Square Garden in 1939 or 1940. But the modern Democrat left are the most narrow-minded, intolerant people our country has ever seen. The modern Democratic left has never read George Orwell. You know what? The modern fascistic right has never read a book. You think the left has never read George Orwell? All right, so he is in charge of trying to take back the Senate for Republicans. And he was on, what do they call it? CBS Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, who frankly, I think she's the best one on the Sunday shows. And she holds people's, both left and right, Democrat, Republican. She asks the questions. She doesn't let them get away with anything. And she had him on talking about two Senate candidates. Now, one of them is Herschel Walker. I've talked enough about him, his incoherent language, his mental illness. And the other one is Blake Masters, who was just won the primary in Arizona. And one of the first proposals he made was to privatize Social Security. Now, I thought we were through this in the Bush administration. But there were several other things that he said that are really beyond the pale. But Margaret Brennan said, you were a CEO of a company. Would you hire these people if you knew these things? Do you think your HR would allow you to hire them? And of course, Rick Scott himself was the CEO of a company that received the largest fine for Medicare fraud in American history, at least at the time it was made. I think, if I remember correctly, it was $1.2 billion. So, maybe he doesn't. So he wasn't indicted, but the people who created the Medicare fraud, he didn't know what was going on. So maybe he doesn't pay very much attention to the people he hires or the people he's promoting to take over the Senate. Take a look at this.
Radio interview in July, you talked a lot about your business as an executive, and you said we should start electing people that we would hire. In Georgia, Herschel Walker, Republican Senate candidate, has lied about the number of children he has, about his business dealings. His ex-wife said he held a gun to her head and said, "I'm going to blow your effing brains out." In Arizona, the candidate Blake Masters called the Unabomber an underrated thinker. He said that al-Qaeda doesn't actually pose substantial threat to Americans. I mean, I've got a list of candidates here who've had some and said some pretty troubling things. Would you hire these people to work for you?
Well, you'd go through each person, but I'm not the one doing it. It's the voters of those states are doing it. The voters of those states are going to make a choice.
You're trying to help Senate Republicans and lead them to victory. These are your candidates.
So, Margaret, as you remember, the voters in Arizona choose who they're going to vote, and what they're going to choose is they're going to choose between Blake Master and Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly has voted to keep the border open. He's never voted for border security. He's voted for the tax increases. He's voted for cutting Medicare. He's voted with Chuck Schumer and with Joe Biden basically 100% of the time. Warnock's got the same problem. This election is going to be about Joe Biden. And so this election is going to be about all the bad things that have happened. The fact that we're going into a recession, the fact that, inflation's at 9%, the fact that gas prices are up $2, all these things, that's what people are looking at.
But these are your Senate Republican candidates. These are your candidates.
And the voters of each of these states, the voters of these states are going to decide if they're going to hire. Now, I get to vote in Florida, and that's how I think about it. But the voters in those states will choose those states who they want. And it's a choice between two people. But look, all the Democrat nominees are basically Biden clones.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, they won't campaign with Biden.
But if you are, you would acknowledge that if somebody went in for an interview for a private corporation, these things would come up as red flags to HR.
Yeah, right. A guy who held a gun to his wife's head and said, "I'm going to blow your fucking brains out," and has a mental illness. And another guy who says the Unabomber was an interesting thinker and al-Qaeda is not a threat, and let's privatize Social Security. Of course, he doesn't want to talk about that. No, this election's about Joe Biden. No, it's not. It's not. It's about who's going to control the Senate and the House. And Nikki Haley was on one of the shows as well, and she said she's going to focus her presidential campaign on gender pronouns. I mean, they're really making a big mistake, I think. They want to run on social issues like, trans rights and, trans athletes and the pronouns and hey, they still think that the Democrats are shouting, defund the police. Joe Biden said we should give the police more money. Joe Biden numerous times. Do you remember Joe Biden's speech when he talked about abortion protesters? He said, please, please, please be peaceful. Whereas at Trump's rally, he said, go fight or you're going to lose your country. And the other speakers said, we've got to kick ass. We've got to take names. We've got to go to the Senate. I mean, they're trying to create these boogeymen. Do I care whether a trans person uses the male or the female bathroom, or somebody wants to be called he or she because that's their gender identification? Yeah, some of it goes too far, but it's not. There's no Democrat making laws about, gender pronouns. All right. Now, someone once said, that all politics is local. And here in Florida, in Delray Beach, we had a mayoral election where the candidate who was challenging the mayor was married to the Republican state representative, had been a Republican, switched her party the day she announced her candidacy. And if you looked on the internet, you could see pictures like this where she was a Trumpette and a supporter of Trump, and Laura Loomer, who was another wacko right-wing extremist. But when she declared for mayor, all of a sudden those sites became unavailable. Can we get, whoops? No? There we go. Whoops, that page can't be found. Okay. So all over Delray Beach, there were these giant wooden posters for her candidacy. They were beautiful pastel colors. And all of a sudden, our mailboxes were filled with misinformation about the mayor, ugly pictures of the mayor, attacks that were unfounded. And they all came from a PAC, Political Action Committee, that was 100 miles away. St. Petersburg, maybe more than 100 miles. They came from the apartment of a 28-year-old kid. And he called his organization Progress for Delray, even though he was in St. Petersburg. And he supposedly had no money in the bank for this PAC. But there was money that was being funneled in by the treasurer of another PAC, who also happened to be the treasurer for this woman's campaign running against the mayor. When she was asked about it, she said, "Oh, I don't know anything about it." When she was asked about being a Trumpette and belonging to the organization, she said, "Oh, I don't know." She was up there as a Trumpette for a year and a half, and she said, "I had no idea what they did. You know, nobody told me that I was a Trumpette." I mean, it got to the point where in the mailbox, we got a picture of the mayor in a MAGA hat, making her look like she was a Trump supporter. Now, the mayor is a registered Democrat, had never been a Trump supporter, had never worn a MAGA hat, and this ended up in our mailbox. Oh, man, this stuff was pissing me off no end. The newspapers, to some degree, looked at this. I don't know why somebody isn't in jail for some of this stuff, but they printed an article like this. Delray Beach voters, beware of last-minute lies in the mayor's race. And they specifically went after this. So anyway, I told, I had sent money to the mayor of Delray, and I said I wanted to support her. And they asked me if I would do an endorsement, a video endorsement. They liked it so much that they used it as a commercial for her. They say all politics is local, but we had a microcosm here of what is happening across the country with the lies and the smears and the money, the dark money. Nobody knows where it comes from. This is the commercial, the endorsement I made originally that became a commercial. I'll tell you more about it when we're finished.
Hi, neighbor. I'm Richard Bey. During my career as a television interviewer, I had the distinct privilege of sitting down and talking with presidents and presidential candidates and governors and mayors. Later, as a radio talk show host, I debated governors and mayors and local political figures. So it's only natural that I'd keep a close eye on the politics here in Delray. My family and I have lived here for many years, so I've seen it all. The scammers, the pretenders, the dark money, the slimy mailers ramming our mailboxes. And they're funded by PACs from outside our community. The influence of special interests who think their money can buy favors, and I'm seeing it here now in Delray on steroids. Please, don't fall for it. I've also seen Mayor Petrolia's hard work for Delray, her vision, her leadership as mayor and commissioner. I've seen her tough insistence that Delray grow, but grow in a reasonable manner, according to a vision, that developers adhere to our zoning and architectural regulations. And I've seen her assiduous scrutiny of developer giveaways and no-bid contracts that cost the citizens of Delray Beach money. And unfortunately, as with all strong women, I've seen the onslaught of coordinated attack by those who see our community as a goose laying golden eggs and not as a place we chose to live, work, play, and retire. This year's the mayor's opponent is sending out slimy attack mailers coming from a registered agent in St. Petersburg. Do you ever wonder why those revolting mailers that say progress for Delray are from St. Petersburg? Ask yourself, why are agents in St. Petersburg so interested in Delray and its residents? They're not. Now ask yourself, what do they expect to get in return for all that money? Overwhelmingly, Mayor Petrolia's campaign funds come from Delray. I myself have contributed to her campaign several times, and I expect something too. You know what I expect? I expect a mayor committed to the residents that live and work here, a mayor who has principles and an overarching vision for the place that has won so many awards for its unique nature, a mayor who is not in hock to special interest, outside monies, partisan ideologies, and connections. The position of mayor, let me tell you, it's not a strong one under the charter, which is why we need a mayor of strong character and commitment to lead us forward. Now, I could be spending this time just criticizing her opponent, who can claim no experience, who has erased her political record to deceive Delray voters and makes wild, almost hysterical claims while plugging herself into a well-financed partisan political machine. But I've chosen instead to detail why I'm voting for Mayor Petrolia on March 9th. And why I've contributed to her campaign. And as a neighbor in Delray, not in St. Petersburg, I urge you to do the same.
Well, after I made that endorsement, one of the supporters, I'm sure just as she did with the PAC, sending out these mailers, I'm sure there'll be a denial that he was not in the employ of the campaign, but there's a guy who was like an attack dog who went after every the person who supported her. And he put up on the internet, you can find it if you want, this big, what a blog or something, where he was attacking me as a multimillionaire, which I'm not, who was a racist exploiting black people, which is what I'm not. And it's probably still up there. And somebody said, oh, you should sue this guy. And I said, who cares? I know what I am, and nobody's going to pay that much mind. But the end of it all was the mayor did win the race. And it was a close race. And when she held a victory party, I got an invitation. And when I went there, she came up and said thank you. And she leaned into me and she said, I think it was your commercial that put me over the top. And there was a very little top. So anyway, I guess you sort of can make a difference. And finally, my affinity for I can't believe it's not butter. I was shocked this week. The last time I spoke about it, the price had fallen. Not by much, maybe 10, 12 cents. It was now, let's see, under $5. It had, when I originally bought it before, COVID and everything and the inflation, it was like $3.75, $3.85 a bottle for spray. And then it went to $4.95. It went to $5.03. That was the high. And then it came back down below $5. Well, the other day, I went to Publix and it was $5.65. It's shot back up. What's in here? Saudi Arabian oil? Anyway, fortunately, a few weeks ago, I bought it at the BOGO sale, buy one, get one free. And I bought 6 of them. So I still have some left at half price. Thank you for watching today, as always. And as always, subscribe if you can. Please share it with others, this podcast. If you subscribe, you'll never miss one. It'll just pop up there for you. And you can listen to it on the audio portion, on the places where you find audio podcasts, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. And when you talk about us on social media, please say nice things. I'll say nice things about you. All my best. Take care.